Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. Finally, it's here, the 2021 budget. It will be presented tomorrow to Parliament. But in this era of COVID-19, how will this budget bring about the required economic growth and actually do things to fast-track the economic recovery? Well, on PM Express, we'll be engaging a former Minister of Finance, an economist, a social activist, and researcher, AGI, and also employers as well, as in their expectations and how should this budget be focused to bring about the growth that we are all looking for in an era of COVID-19. All these things wrapped up on PM Express tonight as we look at all these. But let's just do a quick wrap in terms of where we are coming from and to here. Now, the budget tax, the 2021 budget looks like expectations and focus as well. If you look at how we came here in terms of the budget, look at how things came back and how we can also look at things in terms of all these things that we look. Now, just about expenditure for last year, something around 67.1 billion Ghana cedis. And what we understand is that it is going to go up significantly. So these are the breakdowns in terms of grants, expenditure, and all the rest. Let's also look at how, so these are the breakdowns. Let's look forward to further breakdowns as well, look at compensation. And they will always take a chunk of government expenditure, 26 billion Ghana cedis. Interest payment to be the next biggest item as well, 21 billion Ghana cedis. Let's quickly look at revenue as well. In terms of the sectoral allocations as well, we're seeing that about 44 billion Ghana cedis, looking at the fact that social spending, infrastructure, administration, and economy as well. These are administrative expenses as well, free SHS, 27%, Electoral Commission, Ministry of Local Government. Let's go for a look at revenue as well, which I think that is the most critical thing as well. So we're looking at infrastructure. Let's look at all these things are going to bring us more important things and all the rest and bring us all those things and blah and all those things. So these are the critical areas that we'll be looking at here. So here on PM Express, we'll be looking at all these critical things. As in the budget, focus and expectations. As we take a short break, and when we get back, we get on to our guest, former Minister of Finance, Caretaker, Bobkin. He's an economist, Chief Executive of the Association of Ghana Industries. Sechuma Kabwa is also online with us. The Ghana Employers Association as well will be joining us in discussions as we look at the expectations and what should be the focus of this budget. Welcome to PM Express Business Edition in the COVID-19 era. What should be the focus of this budget? And what are the expectations of industry captains, economists, and those who have been in that position before? And it'll be a good time to join my guest via Zoom. Caretaker is a former Minister of Finance. Bobkin is an economist, and also Sechuma Kabwa is a Chief Executive of the Association of Ghana Industries. Let me get the ball rolling, and also we also join on the line by as well as the Chief Executive of the Ghana Employers Association, and also Dr. Steve Mantel. He's a research policy analyst, bringing some social dimension to this whole discussion as well. But let me get onto the line. And news coming in from Parliament earlier this evening actually says that the Minister or Majority Leader in Parliament has been appointed as the Caretaker Minister for the Finance Ministry. Let me get onto the line. Caretaker is a former Minister of Finance. Seth, what do you make of this news?
Yeah, thank you very much and good evening to your viewers. The budget is presented on the authority of the President, for which reason the President can appoint, in the absence of the minister, any other minister or MP for that matter to represent him in presenting the budget. But I believe the news coming out is in conformity with, I believe, the standing orders, of Parliament, which anticipates that the budget will be presented by the Minister for Finance, irrespective of the Constitution saying that the budget should be appointed on the authority of the of the president. Here we are seeing two processes, and we are very elaborate processes when it comes to this. We are seeing the standing orders of the House, which is binding on the House itself, stating specifically that it should be presented by the Minister for Finance. And therefore, for purposes of presenting the budget, and I don't know for what other purposes, and the debate that has to be led by the Minister for Finance. And his deputies who can also debate are yet to be vetted, and approved. So I believe that is what has become necessary for the president to inform the speaker, that the minister designated for purpose of presenting the budget will be the majority leader in the House.
But Honorable, just some clarity. I mean, I knew that the president had the right to appoint anybody to do the presentation, but from this letter that the speaker read to the House, it's not just about him presenting the budget, but more of, let me be careful with my choice of words, a temporary minister in charge of the finance ministry as well.
Well, one can say, so long as the president appoints somebody, I don't know whether we can, I can make that inference, and I'm not a constitutional lawyer. But what I know specifically is that the budget is presented on the authority of the president. And even when the Minister for Finance presents the budget, when it is being tabled, you beg the speaker to table the budget on the authority of the president. And in fact, the introductory, parts of your, the introductory parts, should have of the budget should have that you are reading the budget on the authority of the president. And coincidentally, in my experience, there was a slippage, and it was the current majority leader, the minority leader, who drew my attention to the fact that it should be on authority. But here we are talking also about the Constitution requiring parliaments to come up with standing orders to implement whatever is in law, which itself is substantively the law binding the House. And so if in their regard they anticipate that the budget will be presented, by the minister, then in their standing orders they have it that it's the Minister for Finance who should present the budget. So I think it's in conformity with
I'll be bringing my other guests in, because I'll also be coming back to you again, Honorable Caretaker, about what goes on at this time in the budget presentation. I know by now the document is done, everything is done. Media houses are out there speculating, including Joy FM and all the rest. Are you taking everything at ease, going through the numbers, crossing the T's, dotting the I's? Because there have been instances where a few hours before presentation, there have been some serious amendments as well. So I'll get some clarity. Godfrey Bobkin is an economist as well. Chase Memensa Bonsu, a caretaker minister for the Ministry of Finance. Much ado about nothing?
Well, I think at this stage, that is what we have. That is what we have to work with. I think there are very serious things that we have to consider, because the first quarter is coming to an end, and you don't want to get into a situation where government machinery comes to a halt and all of that. And therefore, I think that let's look at the bigger picture.
I see. Interesting on that one. Let me come back.
My understanding is that the finance ministry is well resourced. There are technical people, well qualified, experienced, and all of that. And therefore, you'll be able to work with them and get the job done for the president.
Let me get back to Honorable Caretaker. At this time, and what happens? Are you sleeping? Are you crossing the T's, dotting the I's? Or what happens at this time before the budget presentation?
Sorry to say, there's hardly any sleep, about 2 or 3 days to the budget. And in fact, for about a week or so, and I believe the tradition continues, for about a week or so before the presentation of the budget, there's a core group of senior officials of the Ministry of Finance, who normally congregate, in a place. I wouldn't want to be to elaborate on that, and make sure that the budget is properly edited. Other senior members of government join them to make sure the tone, particularly of the speech, is right, which is a summary actually a summary of the introduction to the budget plus other important key elements of the budget. And sometimes the Minister for Finance may stay with them up to a point. You need rest to actually go through that ritual. Then I can show you early in the morning, you are back very early taking the speech and going through it to make sure that, there are no slippages, as you, as you rightly pointed out. So I think it's only when the budget is read that you have some respite, and then you prepare, for the other things. Let me just mention for the benefit of the general public that many of us tune out after the budget is read, but that's just the beginning. Because as I indicated in my earlier introduction, the speech is not the budget. At the end, the budget is formally tabled. So especially viewers might want to not tune out tomorrow after the budget is read and observe, the now minister designates, begging the speaker to table the budget and the estimates and the government's economic policy, which must also be presented to Parliament, before the House. Now we have other documents like the public debt report and the rest, as the petroleum report, which are also tabled, but that's another PFMA, other acts. When that is done, then the speaker refers the document formally, to the finance committee and to other committees. And let me just summarize quickly.
Yeah.
After this referral and a workshop for all MPs, each Minister for Finance appears before the appropriate committee to defend his or her estimates and the policy and opinions, the programs and things that go into it. And the committees then, if you recall, come back one after the other to present their reports to the House, which is debated.
Okay. Let me bring in Prof. Bobkin. I mean, in a COVID time like this, we've heard stories, or we are picking up some indication that they will look at growth, revitalization, rejuvenating the economy and all the rest. For you, what should be the prime focus of this budget?
Okay, thank you. And let me say good evening to our cherished viewers. I think that reasonably the expectations are high. But of course, in the midst of that, we have to be moderate with our expectations also. It is not as though Ghana just emerged out of the moon. We know ourselves, we know our challenges. We have a fair idea of what COVID has done to us in terms of the macro-fiscal impact and all of that. We know what it has done to our revenue envelope. We know the new expenditure patterns that have emerged in the face of ballooning public debt. And yet we must maintain public safety and maintain macroeconomic stability and all of that. So all these things should help us to understand and welcome whatever that will be presented. And by and large, my understanding is that this offers the government the best moment to give us a comprehensive roadmap that lays out our recovery. Because now we've had data, we've had time, we've understood how things have played out. We've seen other projections. We've seen from the IMF World Economic Outlook update and all of that. We've seen from our own vaccination, our own strategies that we have put in place and all of that. And therefore, this gives us the best opportunity to outline a roadmap. And I'm not just looking forward to a GDP growth. I'm looking forward to a job-rich economic recovery. And government will have to come clear. And I'm looking forward to not the broad-based policies and all of that, but I'm looking forward to targeted policies that would engineer growth that will come along with job creation. That is fundamental. It's fundamental.
So
we can't be talking about...
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, we should be asking ourselves, what kind of post-COVID-19 economic recovery is Ghana looking forward to? A job-rich one? Inclusive, that is what we are looking forward to. We no longer can celebrate the usual GDP days, GDP that and all of that. Because today, if you look at the data in terms of unemployment, these are critical issues that we have to pay attention to. So I'll also be interested in what specific policies government would put in place that would engineer growth from the labor-intensive subsectors of the economy. That is very, very important for me, given our population dynamics and all of that. And then, more importantly, the success or otherwise of this budget is going to be hinged largely on our domestic revenue mobilization strategy. That is key.
It's good you've spoken about revenue. It might be a good time because from what we are picking up, it's clear that taxes will be going up. Let me bring in the Chief Executive of the Association of Ghana Industries from the perspective of industry. Are you prepared for it? It is going to go up. Government is hoping to bring in over 5 billion Ghana cedis to show up its revenue. Are you ready for this?
Well, thank you, George, and good evening to your viewers. Well, we are expecting a good budget that will be very inclusive, a good budget that will help create the jobs that we need. And as industry, we believe that the best way to create sustainable jobs to support industrial development. We know government has to mobilize revenue to be able to carry on its development plans and projects. And the revenue mobilization strategy is key because if you get it wrong, it can be a counterproductive activity. If you get it right, it stimulates economic development. One way is to mobilize taxes. And I think that we may have to be a bit careful because we have just come out of the pandemic. We are still living in it. And last year, we all know how industry suffered, businesses suffered because of the pandemic. So we are actually under terrible pressure as businesses and industries. And therefore, we rather want to see some reliefs to get businesses stimulated and help create the jobs that we need. So if you come up with new taxes, we want to see the form it will take. But generally speaking, one will have to be very careful in coming up with taxes that takes away the resources of businesses to government chest and rather prevent them from investing in their businesses and expanding their businesses and stimulating the economy and employing people. So if you ask me if you are ready for new taxes, I would say it depends on the nature of the taxes. We are also very much aware that government, through the national ID system, is trying to introduce new ways of expanding the tax net, which we believe is the right way to go. If you're able to expand the tax net and rope in a lot more people, then you don't necessarily need to increase new taxes or introduce new taxes, but then ensure that everybody pays its quota. In that case, you can still raise adequate revenue to support your development project instead of increasing taxes. It's a very dicey issue because if you don't handle it well, it's going to stifle the economic development through of the businesses, and that will affect the economy as a whole.
Alex Frimpong is the Chief Executive of the Ghana Employers Association. Let me bring him in. He's joining us via the phone. I knew that before today, you issued a statement saying that, listen, there should be other innovative ways in dealing with the revenue challenge and not taxes. It appears from what we are picking up, there will be some tax reviews as well. You describe it as a disappointing situation, or, well, you have no choice?
Well, thank you, and good evening to your viewers. I think we concede that government need tax revenue to fund its economic activities, especially given the economic issue problems that have been occasioned by the pandemic. And again, if you want to introduce the taxes, what will be the impact on businesses? And like Prof. Bobkins rightly said, how do you situate that within the context of a pandemic situation? How does it stimulate the economy? How does it stimulate the entrepreneurial acumen of Ghanaians? How does it stimulate growth through employment? So, well, you may want to introduce new taxes, but it has to be balanced against the impact it will have on businesses and the business community, and also how the government can also raise revenue. So it has to be a balancing act. And under these circumstances, after the budget has been read, Honorable Secretary rightly said, that's where the work begins. You may need to dialogue to ensure that you have a balancing act, that you are able to ensure that the business community is not hurt, while at the same time ensuring that some moderated revenue to go to government to a serious economic agenda is also assured. So I think dialogue, even after the budget has been read, is going to be a very, very prominent issue that I'm sure business associations will have to come together to engage government on.
I know there's something that critically happens a few days before the budget, and you being an employers or representing employers in this country, have you finalized discussions on the new national daily minimum wage?
Well, it's work in progress. Discussions are ongoing at the National Tripartite Committee level. When it is concluded, the general public would be made aware of that.
We have a day before the presentation. I thought the convention was that you agree on these things before the presentation.
Well, under normal circumstances, that is what normally happens. Because of the election and the spillover to the following year, given the government's own budget arrangement and economic program, normally during an election year, we hardly do that. We only want to work with government to get the first quarter estimate in accordance with the rules, so that in the event that there's a new government, then you don't commit them by way of fixing a minimum wage that they cannot cope with under their new economic arrangement. So the understanding over the period is that you determine the national daily minimum wage during or immediately after the first quarter of the year after the election.
I spoke to some, these are not, they are also big businesses as well, and they told me that, George, because of COVID, if we have our own way, can we freeze the minimum wage? Has it come to your attention?
Well, it has. They are members. These are sentiments that businesses have expressed. And all these factors are going to be taken into account in the conversation among the social partners. And at the end of the day, a decision will have to be made and what is more feasible and what the economy can contain and what business can also contain. So it's the next coming days, when it comes to wages, is going to be a very interesting discussion.
Interesting, Mr. Frimpong. Hold on, let me get back to Mr. Setekpe. And today I'll be placing him in a role of when he was a finance minister, I also seeking his independent thought as well. I mean, let's deal with the tax argument and the economic justification and the political risk as well. How easy it is when you look at the numbers as a minister, when you were in office, and you realize that there's a need to review the numbers to increase revenue, and you have others, interested groups, and even cabinet ministers who think that, listen, we will not approve this thing. How do you deal with this? I mean, a day before presentation, we're elemented in government, in other words, that we can't go ahead with this because it will work against us.
Well, we went through the global financial crisis, and we also went through, the power crisis, which was occasioned by the disruption in gas supply from Nigeria, if you recall, and then the tariff bearing and other issues, falling crude oil prices, and I would be charitable in saying that we would not discuss what we are talking about now in the context of crisis, as nuisance. So we're not talking about nuisance taxes, if you recall. This was a tax, when we had those crises. But let me just say that, let's be candid as Ghanaians. We should not put everything on COVID. Our problem started before COVID. And let me give you just a couple of numbers. The government started with a deficit of 4.5 in the budget. There were no provision. You got 4.5 because there were no provision for bailout costs, even though you had ESLA. Yeah. There was no provision for energy sector costs, even though you had ESLA. And that's how we achieved that 4.7% projected deficit. By the time we did a mid-year review, again excluding these elements, the deficit had increased to 11.4%. If you add these elements, the deficit was already 13.4, and I'm quoting from government's official documents. You have to go to the appendix to see it.
And you're trying to contextualize it, but still coming back to my question,
yes. I will. But I think that we should be candid so that we know the source of the problem. It's not just COVID.
Okay.
Now, we went to the IMF. We calculated the cost of COVID to be approximately 2.5 to 3%. The COVID document itself, and you can verify it, established a fiscal gap of 6% already before the consideration. It's in the COVID report. So the question is, if the cost of COVID is 2.5 and it is covered by the IMF loan, 1 billion, right? World Bank and others, even if you added it to 4.5, you are having something around 8%. So what accounts for 13% difference?
Okay.
I think we should be very candid with ourselves before. Otherwise, we would not be tackling the problem. We will just be putting everything, on COVID. And I'm saying this, I'm not downplaying COVID at all, because as I said, I went through quite a number of crises, and before, before COVID, the global financial crisis was supposed to be the worst. So I would entreat, all technical people, professionals, lecturers, and the rest to look at the numbers so that we can find, the IMF has started adjusting our deficit back to 2018 to 7%, from 3.5, 4 point whatever to 7% and 7.2%. Now, on the taxes, let's also not forget that there were tax increases even before COVID. Remember, the personal income tax was increased. The top marginal rate to 35%, and then later reduced to 30%. ESLA was increased in 2019. There was no COVID. If you recall, the ESLA levy was increased. The temporary taxes, which we normally bring in during, periods of crisis like this, which were brought in 2015, were not made to last, despite 3 oil fields and everything, right? So if you take this, and I don't want to over-elaborate, then you will see that why were these taxes coming even before COVID? There was a problem. And how come the deficit was adjusted? We are saying that we want to climb down. If you take the expenditure in advance of appropriation, we want to climb down from the 13.4%, which is the government's own figures, to somewhere around 8%. Are we saying we are going to do austerity of 7%, 5%, between 5 to 7%? Is that a target? And these are the things that are prompted. You cannot achieve it through only expenditure cuts. And this is why the question of taxes. And I have no doubt that it may come to pass because the Minister for Information appears to be preparing our minds, already.
But sorry to take you back.
That COVID had worsened the situation, but we must also dig deeper so that we become very candid. I believe it's also
I think you've laid well there, but I'm saying that.
Sorry, debt, I'm just rounding up. Apart from the deficit, debt is at 80%. The 74.4% that the Bank of Ghana gave was at the end of November. So if you add about 15 billion or so average monthly expenditure, that already takes us to 80%, which ties in with the Moody's, estimate. So we should be candid and look at every, all the issues, and then Ghanaians may, be charitable enough, as I said, to accept tax increase.
But just as I wrap up with you, the argument about dealing with the economic justification and the political pressures, how do you manage this a few days to budget presentation when you know that you have to review the rates to plug the holes and finance other things?
It is not an easy decision to make. And remember, this is, long before even the night. The decision would have been made in cabinet. Because remember, under the Public Financial Management Act, it is cabinet that is the ultimate. It has always been the ultimate. So what we are discussing, some of these issues would have come up in the fiscal strategy document that is now mandatory to be presented by the Minister for Finance, to cabinet. But it doesn't give you comfort. The fact that you have cabinet behind you and you are coming out. And let me give you it's very difficult. Because when we read the 2015 budget going into 2015 budget in November 20, that was when crude oil prices fell. And if you prepare a budget, with $99 per barrel, which is the benchmark, and you find the price dropping as it happened, during COVID, to around 40, 45%, 35%, it opens a big gap, and it's no comfort to any minister for finance. But let me just quickly also state that the wage issue is no longer a convention, with due respect to my colleagues from the employment and other sector. It is in law. Section 19 of the PFMA states that the wages should be negotiated to make the budget more stable by April. So putting it on election, it was anticipated elections and everything. That's why it was April. That's when it should have been negotiated. And remember, I said that negotiation also delayed, which is why the mid-year review, actually the three items that were increased were energy, wages. It was not COVID. If you look at the items that were increased, it had nothing to do. So now there is a formula in the PFMA section 19, which is saying that in the absence of the negotiation, you take the prior year negotiations, that is 2019 in this case, right? Make some adjustments and others, and that is what should be used in the budget. That is what is going into the Appropriation Act. Okay. And therefore, any negotiation that takes place, if it doesn't, no announcement is made tonight, right? It's going to be binding until maybe the next media review. So now we have legislation that is binding this thing. So it's no longer a convention. And the question, therefore, is whether Labour would tolerate this and continue with the negotiations. If you remember, there was COLA and others. During crisis, Labour comes in and accepts some of these things. Remember there was COLA, during the single spine and other, which led to budget. So I just want to draw attention to this.
Prof Bobkin, I'll go to Prof Bobkin, but I would take a short break and get back to Prof about what about the expenditure cuts as well? We always hear revenue. What would be the contribution of cutting expenditure in these times to also plug some of the loopholes and deal with the deficit as well? But let me take a short break. I'll be right back as we engage our industry experts on expectations and focus of 2021 budget that will be presented to Parliament tomorrow. And if you just join us, the minister that is the majority leader in Parliament, Chairman Sabunsu, he has been appointed by the President as the Caretaker Minister for Ministry of Finance. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we look at expectations and focus of the 2021 budget. What should be the focus and what should be the focus and also the expectation of businesses as well as you engage the former Minister of Finance, the TEPED. Professor Bobkin is a professor of finance and economics, and also Chuma Kabwa is the chief executive of the Association of Ghana Industries, and also we have Alex Frimpong, who is the chief executive of the Ghana Employers Association. Now, Mr. Bobkin, Prof. Bobkin, when I signed off, I was trying to get your thoughts about dealing with the challenge of managing revenue shortfalls. What about cutting expenditure, or in quotes, a COVID time, don't think about cutting expenditure, just like what the current IMF boss said, that we should put deficit to the back burner right now?
Yeah, certainly with COVID and then the coping strategies that we have put in place, certainly there will be some savings, okay, terms because travels have been restricted, conferences and all of that. So budgets that would have been made for some of these things certainly should be made available for other critical sectors of the economy. So to that extent, I believe that the government will have to look at that alignment and all of that, and then adopt a more digitized way of doing things now, which will save costs on stationery and other things. So we will be looking forward to that, because the way things are being done now are a bit different from the way things were done in the past and all of that. And I think that, and we have said before, that our best response to the impact of COVID and all that we have gone through will be a lean government. And because the countries that developed actually did not develop on the back of greater resources. They did so on the back of greater efficiency. So we have to be able to explore greater efficiency in the way we deploy our limited resources. And if you check our history, you realize that Ghana's problem has more to do with waste and inefficiency more than perhaps lack of resources. And I'll show you why. You see, and Honorable Setekwe talked about the fact that deficit started rising before COVID came. And that is true, because Ghana practically walked from one crisis to the other to this pandemic. Between 2012 and 2015, it was energy crisis. But you examine critically the efficiency level with which we resolve the energy crisis and the impact on our revenue envelope today. Look at then from energy crisis, we walk straight to financial sector crisis. Look at the cost of that to the state. We are talking about billions of cedis in resolving that. And look at the efficiency level in resolving that. We did not actually exit the financial sector crisis, and then we walk straight to this pandemic and all of that. So I think that going forward, we can learn from others. Let's explore greater efficiency. Look, resources are limited, and that statement does not apply to only Ghana. But the beautiful thing is that those scarce resources have alternative uses. So the extent to which we are able to maximize the alternative uses of those scarce resources, that's what makes the difference. And that is what I'm expecting. I'm not expecting a huge government size. A lean government should be the way out. And let's employ greater digitization in how services are rendered. That can also result in cost savings to us and all of that. And then, so we need to do a number of these things, because other than that, you can get as much revenue as you want. But when inefficiency is also rising, at the end of the day, you may end up with a zero-sum game. These are problems as a country.
Prof, I agree, and not to get you guys wrong, but I agree with the argument about lean government and all the rest. But some would see that, what is the overall contribution as well to managing the expenditure pairs? Some would see that the biggest problem is wage and interest payment.
Yes, but
Seth, you wanted to make a quick comment?
No, let the professor finish.
Yeah. Prof, I'm saying that the biggest challenge might be interest payment and the public wage bill. So you can even have 5 cabinet ministers, if you're still borrowing more, if you're still having a bloated wage bill, that is where the problem is.
Yes, but you're having that, but look at it this way. If we are talking about greater productivity enhancing reforms, government has the ultimate responsibility. You can say that the wage bill is that huge. Is that huge relative to the size of your revenue envelope? Okay? Because look, one basic function of the state is to collect taxes. And if you look at our tax effort, it's one of the lowest in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay? So one way of doing it is to say that expenditure is very high. But we have leakages in our revenue envelope that we should be able to block. And we have to also look at expenditure within the entire public sector. I agree with you. The wage bill, what is it? Because we've gone through a lot of process over this, even with the IMF program, with the fees on recruitment and all of that. But you see, you have to look at it in relative terms also. And then you have to look at the productivity that is coming along with it. Government has a role to play in all of this. But if you look at the debt, I mean, it just didn't happen overnight. It's Ghana's debt since cumulatively over a period. And look at the cost, which is crowding out priority spending. But I think that beyond that, even the little that we're able to make available, we are not exploring greater efficiency in there. Any country that is corrupt is also inefficient at collecting taxes. You check the literature. The leakages in our revenue envelope goes directly to individual pockets and benefit individuals and all of that. The state has an incentive, okay? And right now, I think that the government has a bigger opportunity now. Why am I saying so? Because the government just won a 4-year mandate. So the incentive to do the right thing and take the bold decision with the political will is higher now than an election year.
Let me bring in Chumakoba before I get to Mr. Setekwe. So for you, industries as well, I mean, what else are you looking forward to ensure that you can contribute your quota to the recovery that government is looking forward to? Because this budget is expected to be themed on revitalization and also rejuvenating the economy as well. That cannot be done by government sitting somewhere. Industries will play a critical role.
Yes, you're right. Industry will play a critical role. But in terms of expectations, we have our own expectations as well of government, because government virtually drives everything. If government gets it wrong, we all suffer. And if government gets it right, it stimulates the economy. So first of all, we want to see an improvement in the macroeconomic environment. I think that the first quarter hasn't been too bad. Inflation has gone up a bit, but it's not too bad. CD didn't depreciate as much as was expected. And policy rate is also within reasonable range. So all the macroeconomic indicators seem to be on reasonable range. Now, going forward, we want to see that we will be able to consolidate this gain that we've had so that businesses can predict. It is only when they can predict that they do investments and then move on with the expansion plans that they have. So that is critical. Macroeconomic stability is very important, and we want to see that reflected in the budget. And now I'm sure when we start turning out the figures, we'll be able to tell whether we are going to have good macroeconomic stability or not. The other aspect is that government has embarked on a number of initiatives to support industrial development, especially in the wake of the Continental Free Trade Agreement. So we want to see something in the budget that is actually committing to supporting industries to expand their operation to be able to take advantage of the Continental Free Trade Agreement. There must be a clear budget in respect of this. Remember, we had the other industrial development plans, such as the One District, One Factory, the stimulus package, the industrial enclave development, and all that. But we had a challenge there. Even though we've had a number of the factories established, one of the major problems that we didn't have as many as we expected is the access to finance. So government had also planned to set up the development bank, which for industrial operators, we think this is key because it gives us access to medium to long-term capital on the more better terms. So therefore, in this budget, we have the expectation that there will be something on the development bank, and we expect that it should be established in the course of the year. We want to be actively involved in its design and everything so that it will address the core concerns of industry. Other areas that we also want to see some improvement, there's a proposal to pass a tax exemption bill.
Yeah.
We know that some of the companies, they are by law exempted in paying taxes on certain machinery and all that they bring into the country. Unfortunately, because there was some abuse along the line, some measures were put in place to stop all these. Now, when you apply for exemption, it takes forever. And we don't think this is good for business. So it's one of the inputs we made into this budget that there must be the passage of tax exemption bill so that we have a clear procedure and everything should be streamlined so that if indeed you deserve it, you must have it within the shortest possible time. It is a constraint to business if you continuously follow your tax exemption and all the duty exemptions and you are never getting it. So these are some of the expectations we have in this budget.
Mr. Alex Frimpong, if you're there with us, I also wanted to find out from you, are you still looking forward to some stimulus packages? So I understand we've lost him on the line. Let me get back to Mr. Setek, former Minister of Finance as well. Should I manage my expectation? Or, listen, maybe, I don't know.
Well, well, we need to manage everything, and Ghanaians should manage and moderate their expectations, because with the budget deficit that is between 13 to 15% and debt 85%, and you quoted the IMF, they are not just asking us, to look at the they are also asking us to even ask for debt suspension, because we cannot get debt relief as a middle-income country. I mean, and these are the realities. Moody's and others have already said it.
Are you looking forward to an austere budget?
What are you cutting? The question is, what would you be cutting? Wages and interest payments. Remember, interest payment is statutory.
Okay. Otherwise,
you default if you don't pay. And then you have not added principal, which is amortization.
Yeah.
Wages, if you add, is 126% of tax revenue. So already we are borrowing. to pay for these two items? Are we talking about retrenchment when we talk about cutting wages? Or we started this conversation by saying that the wage negotiations was bogged down. These are some of the reasons why it's bogged down. Wages increased, between the budget and the mid-year review by 1.9%, of GDP, or 28%, because wages was expected to be, and these two items were expected to be 98, percent of tax revenue, which is already close. Wages and interest payments are 13.8% of GDP. Your tax revenue is 13.9% of GDP. So those two items have taken over. And I'm talking about gross. Before we make provision for earmarking and other things. So that is why we are talking about taxes. Because the room for cutting anything, especially when capital is only 2.8% of GDP, and you want to build it. So these are the constraints that we have in the budget, and I think we should just look, critically. That is not in a solid. Let me end on this note. I think that we should.
I understand our time is up. Sorry, Mr. Honorable, I have to drop the curtain down here. I appreciate your time so much, our distinguished guests who joined us for us to have a discussion. All too soon, time is up, and I know tomorrow we'll all be looking forward to this budget presentation by the leader of government business, Che Mensa Bonsu. Whether it will bring about the growth and the recovery, what time will tell. Have a great day.